Okay.
Hi everyone, I am Dee, and this is Spiritually Speaking for another episode. And I have the beautiful Jill Hart with me today, who is the host of the U World Order Showcase podcast, which is an amazing podcast that showcases different incredible people and how they themselves are being the change they want to see in this world. So that's a very exciting thing. So, Jill, thank you so much for being my guest today on my podcast. I got to record with you on yours not too long ago. And so it's really exciting to switch it around and dive into this deep topic that we're going to talk about today. I'm so excited.
Well, it's kind of a change for me. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk with you.
Very
But
welcome.
I normally talk about podcasting and leveraging them to attract clients and build your authority. And this is totally in a different vein, and it's my passion. I just had to come talk with you.
I'm so happy that you agreed to come because, like, we were chatting just a minute ago and we decided, oh gosh, we're getting deep already. Let's just jump onto the podcast and talk about this and record it so everyone can listen in about the depth of this subject and just the
For sure.
multifaceted amazingness, I'm going to say, of this topic.
For sure, for sure. And we were talking about the dreams that you've been having and the neon blue lights. That's kind of what started this, to get the audience up to speed on where we're going with the conversation. And you had asked me about what my thoughts on that were, and then I had gone to another person who was interviewed on my podcast and asked them the same question because I was really curious, and they they're like us, they're interested in these different kind of fringy topics. And she was saying that the neon blue had to do with your throat chakra and different star beings trying to get your attention from other galaxies. Do you call them galaxies? Do you call them star clusters, stars? I don't
I,
know.
I think
Um,
everyone has a different way of saying it.
Yeah, but she said they were from the Syrian thing, Arcturian or Palladian. Those were the three groups that she said were related to that blue color.
Mhm.
So now you're all caught up and we can have the conversation. Oh, shall I ask, or shall I add the other part about the split consciousness? Should we?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing that we were talking about is whether you can exist in regards to star beings, whether you could exist in more than one consciousness at a time. So are I will pose the question, are we relegated to being only in this consciousness, or do we actually exist in several consciousnesses at one time as a single being?
Yeah.
And might that not be the aliens that are out there that we see?
Yeah. Or maybe we are them and they are us. That was the
Yeah.
question. And it's a fascinating one. I love it. And actually, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, not on the topic of extraterrestrials, but on, and I love to call them universal beings. That's to me, that's
Yeah.
just sounds so much nicer and more friendly,
Inclusive.
inclusive. Yes. And so I love to call them universal beings or UBs. And but this lady wasn't talking on the topic of that, but just on the idea that we are a fractal of a soul and not the complete soul, and that different fractals of our soul exist in these different dimensions, timelines, galaxies, star systems, wherever, and that we actually are just little pieces scattered about, and this is just one of our little pieces. So it's a pretty fascinating topic for sure, and mind-blowing to a lot of people. To me, I just think it's like, oh, let's just sit down and talk about this. Let's explore it. Is that a thing? Because when you think about it and how we talk about the collective and being one and being bits and parts of the whole, doesn't that just make sense though?
It makes total sense. And it reminds me of this movie I watched recently. It's called Everything Altogether and something. It has Jamie Lee Curtis in it. It's It's a fascinating movie. I love Jamie Lee Curtis anyway, just because she's just so real and raw. But it explores the idea that every every timeline exists simultaneously. Time time is just a human construct anyway. It's so we can meet up at the same point in the consciousness, so we know when to collide.
Right.
Um, but the movie it goes along the lines of this woman that can shift between timelines, and she comes to realize that the timeline that she's in is a great timeline because she's not excellent at anything in any one in the timeline that she's in, but she's really good in different timelines. But it all comes together in this timeline that she's in. And it has to do with the relationship she has with her daughter and her husband. And it's a fun and funny movie because, Jamie Lee Curtis, but it really explores this whole topic of, do we exist in one point or do we exist in many points? And we're just conscious of this one expression, but in other facets, we're only conscious of that expression
Hmm.
of reality.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can't flip between those.
And I wonder if we do, because we've heard the phrase in any given moment there are infinite possibilities. So I wonder if that's a piece of it. It makes you, I mean, the more you dig into this, the more this stuff, like you find this like cohesive thread that is wound through a lot of the things we say, but we just say them frivolously without any depth of, understanding or consciousness of the impact. And I think that's the logical mind, that keeps us limited, which is, if you follow this stuff very deeply, that's what they talk about is the agenda is keeping us dumbed down to where we're stuck here in this third dimensional world, in this third dimensional reality where we're not aware and we're not communicating with our higher selves and ascending through the levels of consciousness. And I mean, it's pretty amazing. It really is. It's so fascinating to me.
It's a form of enslavement.
Yes.
There's a large swath of the world that's enslaved, and it has nothing to do with your monetary status. It has to do with your openness to accept concepts that are unlimited.
Yes.
It's really the true definition of freedom is freedom in your mind
Mhm.
to be able to imagine, because it's through your imagination that anything is created in your reality.
Mhm.
And yes, things can happen and you can be put in situations or you can find yourself in situations, but you'll never find yourself in a situation that you didn't create yourself. So if you find yourself someplace that you don't want to be, you need to really think about what you were thinking about to get you there and start thinking about something different.
Yes. Yes. And it is true. And, I've been thinking about that so much lately. And Tony Robbins, I believe, is the one who said, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you want to
Mhm.
know what is going on in your life, why things are the way they are, if you, like you said, think about where your thoughts have been going, you'll find that they correspond with what your actual physical reality looks like.
When I first met Tony Robbins or heard about Tony Robbins was when he was first getting started. And I went to one of his first conferences, and there were maybe 50 people in the room. I lived in San Diego and it was back in the 80s. So I go to this conference to see what he has to say. And it was, back in the 80s when this was really, really new. It was before the internet, before any of that stuff. So I go in, I sit down, I don't know anybody in the room, and he starts talking about two people that really influenced his life, Mother Teresa and a gentleman named Captain Steve Coffey. Captain Steve Coffey was my neighbor. I knew him
Really?
very well. I knew his kids. He was, yeah, like literally my next door neighbor. He his sons, he had three sons, and I have two sisters, and we were like the lifeguards for the base. We lived on the base because my dad was in the military. So and the neighbor next to them, the Gormans, their their son was also a lifeguard. So all of the lifeguards on the base, on the beaches in Hawaii, um, were in this little cul-de-sac. So anyway, he's talking about Steve Coffey, and I'm thinking, Steve Coffey, his big thing was that you're only as captive. He was a prisoner of war for 7 years in Vietnam. He was shot down. He was a pilot, Navy pilot, and he was shot down. And he was in prison for 7 years. And he gives speeches. He used to. He's passed. He passed a couple of years ago. But he used to give talks on being free was all in your head, and how they would communicate with each other, even though they were in individual cells, and they had a way of tapping. It wasn't Morse code, it was some different way of tapping where they could talk to each other and they could talk quickly. Um, it was just, it was so fascinating to now I see Tony Robbins and he's this big brand, and but it's like, I remember where he got started, and I remember what those two key principles were, because Mother Teresa was the same thing. She is this huge brand, but she was just one woman who
Yeah.
accomplished so much because she really didn't want anything for herself. It
Right.
was it was all about, the freedom is in the allowing the energy to flow. Both of them,
Yeah.
that was the main theme of both of their missions here on life in this plane
Yeah.
for where.
Yeah. One of the things I remember so distinctly about Mother Teresa being involved in the conversation is when Wayne Dyer said that she was asked if she would march in the parade against the war. And she said, no, but if you have a march for peace, I will march in that parade. So she wasn't like against things as much as she was for what she believed in. And I just think that is
Yes,
so cool. I just really think that's so cool.
I think that's it, part of the whole awakening is moving towards rather than moving away from. Like
Yes.
I don't have any use for war. I have no use for militaries. I have no use for borders. I have no use for a lot of this stuff that exists in this reality that we're existing in together, coexisting in. But I'm really for individual freedom and people people being able to express themselves and people being able to eh, be who they were created to be, and not trying to have to be the best at everything. They can just be the best at what they're really passionate about.
Yes.
And in that way they enrich the whole world. It's like a horn in the symphony trying to be a guitar. It's not ever going to be a guitar. It's a
Right.
horn. It's designed to do a certain thing, and each one is slightly different, depends on who's playing it and how it was made, and all the things. So it's each unique. It might have a purpose that's shared, a common purpose, but each individual thing is different,
Yeah.
and it has slightly different sound to it and tone to it. And as we all become and express the individual instruments that we are, it
Mhm.
makes the symphony of life that we get to experience so much richer.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And the horn isn't trying to convince the guitar to become a horn. And the guitar is not
Yeah.
trying to convince the horn to become a guitar. They just exist there in beautiful harmony and allow each of their own individual uniqueness to shine. And that is so much what I love about individuals who just allow, don't try to convince and be divisive. Just, eh, you know, every flower is beautiful in its own way, but they're all uniquely different. It's the same thing. And then you put them in a bouquet and they look how beautiful they are together. It's incredible.
And flowers that are the same species are each different. Everything
Yes.
is different. There's nothing that's the same. My husband, I'll tell you the story. My husband loves things that are at right angles, and he's always complaining about things in my backyard that are cattywampus. And finally I looked at him and it's like, right angle to what? There is nothing square in our yard. Nature is not square.
No,
Nature is lines and curves and angles and spirals and all these beautiful things, but it is not square.
right.
You know, you may have one line that matches up, but I promise you the other line is going somewhere else.
Yes, yes, that's true. And I love the naturalized yards, like we have a big, huge, probably about a 12-foot space from our fence line to the road. And
Mhm,
and so many people in this area, and I just love this. They plant it with wildflowers. And
mhm.
the companies that come along and mow, they're not even supposed to mow it. They're supposed to allow it to be exactly how it is in all its wild beauty with all the different colored flowers in there. And we're going to plant our, area there also with wildflowers so that it can just be, we're not going to mow it. We're going to let the pollinators come and do their jobs. And it's beautiful. I mean, it doesn't
It
always
is
have to be
beautiful.
so polished and perfect, which
My
isn't it?
backyard's like that. I do have garden raised beds
Mhm.
that are, yeah, they're a challenge for me, but often I'll let things go to seed in the fall and they'll
Mhm.
blow. Like I had lettuce one year and it blew, all the seeds blew off into the grass. And so last year I had lots of lettuce in my grass. It was like, well, honey, you can mow, but this is this patch of grass, just leave it alone.
Yep. This is our
It's got
salad
lettuce in it and
area.
I'm going to eat it.
Yes,
I know it
that's
just
so
looks like
cool.
tall grass, but
Yeah, that
and
is
so
so
many of
cool.
the weeds are edible too.
Mhm.
So it's like I don't know why people insist on, having only grass.
Yeah, it's
I look at it.
a learned thing, and that's like so many of the things that we have learned, all these rules that we're supposed to follow and the indoctrination that we're meant to look
Mhm,
at things a certain way. That's exactly what we've been talking about. It's just
mhm.
said in a different way right there. So, yeah, we've got to just relax, I think that's it. Just relax and breathe. It doesn't have to, we make things so much more difficult than they have to be. Like that song, Free
Yeah,
Your Mind and the Rest Will Follow.
yeah, I love that. It's so true. We are our own worst judges. That we critique ourselves to match up with some imaginary perfect standard, which doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay, you'll never get there. You may as well just be happy with what is.
Hmm.
I think Byron Katie says, loving what is. You know, just love what is. It might not be the way you want it, but appreciate what you've got and, think about how it will feel when you're experiencing something different. And
Yeah.
that different will happen for you. It's just like the more you focus on things, the more that thing that you're focusing on will materialize. Manifesting is just materializing things that already exist in the universe.
Yes.
Everything already exists.
Yes.
Every possibility exists. Everything exists because nothing exists. Okay? It's everything and nothing all at the same time.
It
I think
is.
that's the name of the movie. But it's true.
Yeah.
We exist, but we don't. We're a collection of individual beings. A cell is a living organism by definition, and we are a collection of cells. Therefore, we are a collective organism. We are not an individual organism. And I don't know if those organisms have consciousness or not. Maybe they do. I've heard people talk about communicating with their body and healing their body by talking to it.
Absolutely. I've
So,
done
I
it.
mean,
Yeah, I've done it. I know it's a thing. It absolutely is. I've healed myself of some pretty decent things like Hashimoto's disease and lichen
mhm,
planus. I've, healed myself of those things. And it's And I've been known to say to my body, you are not the boss of me. Like you don't get to pick this. And then you don't put so much focus on it. You
Mhm.
address the issue and then you let it go. But when you think about how cells work, when you get a cut, what happens? These different cells rush to that area. So if there was no consciousness, how would they know to do that? They would just be like, whatever, you're just going to bleed out now, instead of sending the cells that are going to coagulate and clot that area so that it stops bleeding and forms a scab, which is protection. It's like nature's band-aid over your wound. So if there was no consciousness, how would they know to do that? I mean, because we're not thinking, oh, okay, let's concentrate really hard and send those cells to those other cells to that area so they can coagulate. And we're not, we don't even have to think about it. It just happens.
Yeah, and our muscles contract, we think we want to walk and we just walk.
Mhm.
It's not like you have to think about, okay, I got to contract this muscle over here and that muscle over there and move my big toe. And there's a lot that goes into taking a step.
Yes.
And you just watch a baby learning to walk because there's balance, which is your inner ear, and all of those cells that are in there. There's cells in the bones, there's cells in your blood, there's just like cells everywhere, and
Yeah.
they're all different. And yet they all have to communicate with each other in some way or another. Maybe that's a universe in itself.
Yeah. That's a fascinating
Maybe we're
concept.
just maybe we're just cells in another organism. Maybe
Yeah.
we're as the earth, maybe that is just one cell in another larger organism, that there's trillions of cells in that.
That's a trippy thought,
Who
isn't it?
knows?
Kind of reminds me of the Dr. Seuss thing where the little fleck of dust has the whole entire like city in there with all of the little tiny people. I can't remember what story that was, but yeah, you wouldn't even think about that. A whole, community being inside of this little tiny fleck of dust, but it was. So it is a thought, isn't it?
I wonder if Dr. Seuss didn't get that from a very old radio show
I wonder if
that I
Dr.
listened to
Seuss,
when I was maybe like, go ahead.
go ahead.
Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seuss was old when I was young. Um, he's also from California. He's from La Jolla.
Okay.
Um, he There was a radio show years ago, back before television even. That's when these radio shows were like Fibber McGee and Molly and the Shadow Knows. There was this one show I listened to. It was about these people, two people that went to a different universe, and the universe was inside of an atom. And they went there and they came back in less than a second. But the time difference, or maybe one went and then the other one was like a second later, but in that second, the person who'd gotten there first had lived, died, had children, had grandchildren, like centuries had passed in that 1 second difference between the two of them hitting that
Wow.
new universe. And it was a tiny universe.
That's
That's
amazing.
always stuck with me. But
Yeah.
I
And
sometimes wonder, where the origination of some of these things are. Like when you're talking about Dr. Seuss, I kind of wonder if that's.
well, if you listen to the people in the know about the UB situation, they
Mhm.
talk about this stuff being given through the higher consciousness beings so that they can create these amazing stories, movies, things like that, so that people aren't so blindsided when the actual disclosure fully happens. I mean, it's happening. It's happening every single day. And if you know where to look, you can find some incredible information about this stuff. And
Mhm.
but yeah, that's the common thought about that, is that this has actually been given so that, I mean, because look at the line of creative movies, these fantasy, these sci-fi, movies, we have this thread that's so common in all of them. And so are we to just believe that all of these humans on this planet, for just no other reason than they just had an idea one day out of the blue? And then when you get that, I mean, you even say it, out of the blue. You know what I mean? Where did that come from? That idea for them to
It's
create that?
blue again.
It's blue
It's
again.
blue again.
It is. Look at that. So that
Yeah.
communication is there and it's been happening. We are so much with our blinders on, because I was raised, as I've said before, in a very religious family. And I was taught that we were the only intelligent life. And I always question that, like, how is that possible with all of these? I mean, just our galaxy alone, how many planets are in it and star systems?
And I totally get what you're saying about being taught that we're the only intelligent life, but it is contradictory because they turn right around and say angels.
Yes,
And angels, by definition, are not human beings.
right.
And Satan, it theoretically is an angel, but then we're dealing with, a piece of work that's been translated, so it's got a bias just by virtue of the fact it's been translated several times, not just
Yes.
once, usually. So it's like, nah, not so much. even even in you're trying to make me believe something that's not true, that it just isn't logical.
It's
There's all these
contradictory.
things that say, yeah,
Yeah,
that
it's absolutely
that's a
contradictory.
word.
And so have you ever had an experience with UBs?
I've seen two of them, their
Okay.
vehicles. Once in, it must have been the 80s, like the late 80s. It was it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was standing out in my front yard in San Diego. And my husband at the time was standing in front of me, and I was looking up at the sky, and I saw this thing go across the sky horizontally, and then it veered off like it was making a triangle off to the right, and then disappeared quickly. I mean, it wasn't like an airplane had turned, because they wouldn't be flying at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they wouldn't have made that kind of an absolute, like they hit a point and then they totally changed directions and went at a different angle.
Mhm.
And then another time, and I think it was the UFO that they saw at Skinwalker Ranch. Have you heard of Skinwalker Ranch?
I have.
Okay, it's not far from where I live. And I was going through what we call the river bottoms, from Preston to Dayton. They're the river bottoms, and there's no cell service there. So that's what it's famous for. So I'm going through the river bottoms, and there's all these fields in the river bottom, and I'm looking up at the sky because I'm getting ready to go back up the other side, and I see this thing just go shooting across, and it was not a star and it was not a satellite. It was just like shooting across, and then it disappeared. It's like stuff does not just like shoot and then stop. Even shooting stars, they have an arc to them, and
Yeah,
they don't go in a straight line, and they don't just like go and then they're bright and then they're not.
right.
So, and then when I heard, I watched this TV series about Skinwalker Ranch, and they were
Mm.
talking about, on the first episode they were talking about it. I was like, God, I think I saw that one,
Yeah.
because I remember it. I
Yeah.
look for those sort of things when I'm out at night.
It's so interesting. I've watched some of the episodes of Skinwalker Ranch also, and I sense energy. You and I have talked about this before. I sense energy very,
Mhm,
very strongly. And if something is awry or different, I feel it. And my
mhm,
feeling about Skinwalker Ranch is that it's part of the agenda, and that
mhm.
the powers that be that are associated with that um, are manipulating the situation and creating. a lot of what is being seen out there. You know, there may be
Could be
some
totally
things
possible.
that happen that are genuine extraterrestrial happenings, but I believe for the most part out there, my personal feeling on it
Mhm.
is that it's absolutely being set up and it's a manipulation because it's part of the agenda to keep people afraid.
I would agree with that. And my take on it just always seemed like it was a bunch of Boy Scouts and who decided to show up and do Boy Scout things.
Yeah.
They just strike me as Boy Scouts and the LDS Church were very closely related for a long time. And the stuff that goes on at Skinwalker Ranch is very much the LDS Church is behind it.
Well, that makes sense to me. It does. Because I mean, I
It's
felt
in
that my
Utah, and that's just like
it doesn't take long. I mean, if you're paying attention, it doesn't take long for you to figure out some things. Like I was hearing, and I'm not going to say the lady's name because I just don't, I'm not going to say her name, but I was listening to this lady who is one of the people in the middle of this disclosure stuff. And I
mhm.
was listening to her one day talking, and I thought, oh wow, she's, you know, on one podcast, she's she's really got some good information and this all makes sense. And then I heard her on another one later, and she was talking about this person had been infiltrated and that person had been infiltrated, and she just kept talking, 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 and just her whole energy was different. And I was like, you've been infiltrated. Holy shit. I had to turn it off. I couldn't even listen to it anymore. It was, and it's somebody that's in the middle of this stuff. And I just felt that so strongly. I thought, holy moly,
A
I'm
lot of
out.
this came out of Art Bell, the Art Bell show.
I
Did you
haven't
ever
heard of
listen
that
to the
one.
Art Bell show?
Mm.
Oh God. He's somebody to look up. We used to listen to him late at night. Another person from the 80s, 90s. Maybe it was the 90s. I think he was in the 90s. Art Bell lived in the middle of the desert, I think in Sparks, Nevada. And his radio show is late at night and he would interview all kinds of wackadoodles. And I think I know who you're talking about because I think she was on this show a lot. Um, and she is tied to Skinwalker Ranch also, if that's who I think you're talking about. But yeah, there were a lot of interesting people. There were some people that were, you know, you could kind of read between the lines and what they were talking about.
Mhm.
They were like remote viewers would get on there and talk, and they talked about, you know, the government using remote viewing,
Yes.
which they do.
Yes.
It's actually a thing. It's a science thing.
They've been trained
And
specifically to do that for the military. Yeah, it's a real thing.
it's it's traveling in your mind and out of your, it's kind of like an out of body experience, but well, it is an out of body experience, but you can learn to do that stuff, and you can be taught to see things clearly even though you're blindfolded. Like there are people that can go into a space totally blindfolded and have somebody put a book in front of them and they can read the whole page and they can't see through the blindfold.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that exist that people are like, nah, that can't possibly be true. But why can't it be true?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I actually said this to somebody not too long ago. I was like, because we were discussing something along these lines, and I said, can you prove to me that it's not true? Prove to me, not just tell me, but prove to me that it's not true. Because if you can't prove to me that it's not true, then how can you tell me it's not true? You know?
We've gotten to a point where people confuse truth with opinions
Mhm.
and wishes.
Yes.
And truth which is supposed to be what science is about, is observable, testable, and repeatable. Then you can have a truth. It's something that you can count on as always being the same. That
Mhm.
is what truth is supposed to mean. But truth, it's the definition of the word and the use of the word has come to mean something that someone holds as a belief that they want to base their reality on, rather
Mhm.
than something that has the Bible talks about a firm foundation.
Mhm.
Well, perhaps that's what it meant, but what what the word means is that you can observe it, it's repeatable, you do the same thing and you always get the same result. It's not like if you drop something from your hand, it will always fall to the ground. Gravity is a truth. I don't know how
Yes.
gravity works. I don't know why gravity works, but the fact that things fall, that is a fact.
Yeah.
It is truth. A truth is a fact. It's
Mhm.
not it's not a wish or
Right.
a hope or
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah. It's not open for debate. It's just one of those things that
Yeah.
is. That's a constant, like you said. Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of them. People want there to be so many things that are true, but really most things aren't true. Even things that you think you know aren't true, because you can change your mind about how you perceived it,
Oh,
and it
absolutely.
makes what you thought about before untrue. You can
Yeah.
change history just by changing what you thought about an event.
Hmm. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? And even Joe Dispenza talks about how most of our memories aren't actual fact. They're not, there's bits and pieces that are, but the way we remember things isn't how it actually happened because it gets distorted over time with our emotions and all of the other things that are involved in hanging on to that memory. So we keep it alive in the way that we perceive it with all of the junk that we attach to it.
And we change it.
And we
And
change it.
we have the ability to change it to make us better, to
Yes.
to make it serve us better. And once you learn that bit of magic, your life is incredibly better,
Oh, it's so much
because you
easier.
just restate everything that caused you trauma or that you hang on to. And it's just like, if you look at it and you say, how is this serving me? And if it's not serving me in the best, highest way, then I'm just going to misremember it the way I want it to be.
Right.
I'm free to do whatever I want in my head.
Yeah, you can change that truth, right? And make it into something new for you so that you can, for your highest and best good, like you said. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I think curiosity is a very powerful tool. I'm a very curious person. I always have been. I question everything. And that's why I love talking about this kind of stuff and listening to other people talk about it. And, I will jump out of conversations that don't feel authentic to me. I'm
Mhm.
open to discussing things, but when there's somebody, like Dr. Sala had a guest on his show not too long ago, and the guy he made great sense up until he got really judgmental about people being able to prove what they were saying. Well, you should plan ahead was one of the things he said. If you know you're going to have that contact with extraterrestrials again, plan ahead. Well, how can you do that? And some people are children when they have these experiences. When I had my experience, never occurred to me to maybe this will happen again. Let me just stow a camera in case, so I can snap some pictures. But if you listen to Elena Danan, who is someone I love to follow, I just think she is so amazing. I love to listen to her. And I listened to her talk about how these situations, even if we did take recording devices with us during these interactions, we wouldn't be able, it wouldn't work because the frequency is so different that our three-dimensional cameras and recording devices, they don't even work. They won't accommodate that higher frequency. So even if we did go to get proof, how are we going to do that if the devices that we have in this three-dimensional reality won't even work at that higher frequency?
And a lot of times when you talk to these people that have had EB experiences, they don't remember them in a way that can be shared in the normal way that you would share an experience. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but you have an experience, and it's really hard to relate an experience to somebody versus an event to somebody,
Mhm.
because it's a full mind, body, emotion immersion into the encounter versus I ran into somebody and we said hi.
Yeah. 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 We were just at the grocery store and we met at the meat counter and we had a conversation. Which everyone can picture
Yeah.
in their mind, immediately, because we've all done that. We've all ran into people at the grocery store or the, flea market or wherever and had these conversations. So it's very easy for us to picture it in our mind. And there are a lot more people coming forward now with their stories about having these UB interactions. So to me, that makes it a lot more believable because so many people are coming forward with it. And you can
Mhm.
feel, to me, or I can anyway, if it's the truth. You feel it in your body, it resonates as truth. And I can also
Mhm.
feel the ones that like are manufactured. You might have had a piece of that might be true, but you have concocted this entire shell of a story around this one little seed of truth, and guess what? This is all I hear. So this little seed gets lost in it because all of this is so much bullshit that it's stronger than the little tiny bit of truth you put in there. So I'm done listening. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
can't do it. So, but it is
So
cool
tell me
that.
about your EB experience.
So mine happened when I was really, really small. And actually, I told you I've only told this story to a very small handful of people because
Mhm.
actually I had literally lost the memory for a while. And it came back to
Mhm.
me about 9 months ago. And I hadn't even shared it with my brother. And we're in our 50s. My brother and I met just at the beginning of this month and went up to Indiana to take care of some stuff. And I didn't tell him this story until we were up there. So it's very new for him to know about it. But my dad was also in the military, and I was
Mhm.
probably about somewhere between 6 and 8. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but somewhere in that vicinity of age. And we lived on MacDill Air Force Base. And what's so interesting about the fact that it was MacDill Air Force Base is that I've heard so many things on Danny Henderson's podcast, Dr. Michael Sala's podcast, specifically calling out MacDill Air Force Base as a base where some of this stuff was happening. So when we first moved there, we lived in this two-story apartment building on the end, and we lived in the upstairs apartment. And there was this metal staircase that went up, and it had a small little landing at the top by the back door. And we usually went in and out of the back door for some reason. I don't know why, but I was asleep one night, and this is how most of these stories go, right? People feel like it was a dream. Did I dream it, or was it a
Mhm.
real experience? So I was asleep in bed one night, and it was almost like I was outside of myself, watching myself be taken from my bedroom through the apartment out the back door. And then it was like my perspective changed a little bit, and I saw this small flying saucer hovering right next to the landing of the outside the back door on that staircase.
Mhm.
And it was, a flying saucer that was shaped kind of like this. It was, that kind of
Mhm.
little diamond shape, I guess, a little
Cigar
bit.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the door was open and they took me in there. I do not remember what these beings look like. So I'm not going to sit here and say it was small grays, tall grays, this, that, blah. I really sincerely do not remember. And I would love to have a regression done, a hypnotic regression, so that I could capture these details that I don't remember. But the next thing I remember is that I was on a table on my back and they were above me and they were doing things to me. And I don't remember anything about what they were doing except for they did something to my left leg on the inside of my calf area. So about halfway between my ankle and my knee on the inside of my calf, they did something that hurt really, really badly. And the next thing I know, I'm back in my bed. And when I woke up the next morning, that area had hurt so bad during that experience that I actually looked, I remember looking at my leg to see if there was a mark on it because it hurt so bad. I'm like, there has to be a mark there because it hurt so bad. Like it was the most intense pain, like a red hot poker got jammed into my leg right there or something. That it was so intense,
Okay.
but I didn't see a mark. There was nothing. There was nothing there. So it was really interesting. And like I said, I would love to have a hypnotic regression done so that I could capture more details from that experience because, you know, it, and I know that there are some people who would tell this story and embellish it to death, like tell all these details. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember what they look like. I just remember that they weren't human. That much I do remember. And of course, the spaceship, you know. So that's my experience as a child where I was taken onto a craft and I don't know what they did to my leg, but this I do know. I told my friend about it who does Reiki and she goes,
Mhm.
let me just scan that area and see if I feel anything different. And she did feel different sensations in that area of my leg. So I don't know what's going on there, if there is anything, you know, I don't know, but she did feel a difference. And then
Interesting.
just in the last several months, I woke up and you don't think about things until you hear something. And I woke up one day and I went into the bathroom and I was brushing my hair and I had my arm up like this. And I saw this mark on my arm and it was about the size of a $50 and it was raised
Mhm.
up like, and at first I thought it was a bug bite or something. It had three dots in the shape of a triangle in the middle of it, three red dots. And I rubbed it and I was like, it didn't feel raised up. When I put my hand over it, it didn't feel raised up, but you could see that it looked raised up. It didn't hurt, it didn't
Huh.
itch, nothing. And then I was watching Danny Henderson, I believe, interview a guest, and they were talking about these marks. She said people will wake up with these marks and they just don't think anything about them, or they'll think they're a bug bite and they'll have three dots in the shape of a triangle. And I was like, what the? I took a picture of it. I have it on my phone still. Or, well, I had Steve take a picture of it because I'm right-handed. And so I wasn't able to take a picture of my
Yeah.
own right arm. And, and she said, it's like these implants get put in your body. And I was like, what the? And she said, you won't feel anything. And I didn't feel anything. It was the weirdest thing. So my friend, when she did the scan on my leg, she also did one on my arm here and felt that different. And people that know me, if y'all think I'm crazy, that's fine. I'm good with that. This is not untrue just because you think I'm crazy. So she did feel a difference in that area too. So I'm really super curious at this point. Like, what does all this mean? I've had other experiences too. And like you said, I've been seeing the neon blue. And we talked about that, but we didn't really go into it. The thing that I had asked Jill about is invited me to go on this event, and we were on this cruise, and I had a dream about this. And the in my dream, Steve and I, who Steve's my heart husband, and Jill and another lady, and there may have been some other people up there. I really don't remember because my focus was on our small group. But along this ship, there were these beams of neon blue, and they were like at a 22-degree angle from the sides of the ship towards the center. And then in the center, there was like a half circle at the top, like that. It wasn't an arch, it was like a circle like this. And
A
they were
dome.
spaced at yes, but it was just the thickness of a beam, like maybe they were like that thick or something, I don't know. And they were spaced at intervals far enough apart where we could easily see the sky. We were up there on the top deck at night looking at the sky, and we were pointing and looking at something in the sky. And
Hmm.
then I woke up. So I'm not sure, but I've seen those blue beams in different. I had asked, because I ask a lot of questions to higher consciousness, angels, guide, source, God, whatever y'all want to call it, it's all the same, the higher power. And I ask a lot of questions, and I was like, well, I want to communicate with the UBs. So how do I do that? And I've asked this question on a couple different occasions. And the first time I asked it, I was told it's a sound within a sound. Still not sure what that means. So, and then the second time I asked it, I was shown these beams, these neon blue laser beams coming out of the top of my head, and they were about the diameter of a large pool noodle, and they were probably 2 to 3 feet long, and they would just shoot out like shoop, 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 just straight up into the sky. And then another time I had this dream where I saw this, it was an off-planet experience. I was looking with someone else at this scene in front of me, and I actually created this scene on Canva as close as I could and posted it on my YouTube channel. So y'all can go find it there. It's actually, the picture's still up in a post on my YouTube channel. But it was like this clear dome, like sphere. It was like the sphere, and it was clear, and it was on this really narrow um pedestal. And from inside of the dome, you could see these control panels, but there weren't any buttons and stuff on them. You just knew that's what they were. And out of that dome came these neon blue laser beams, just like three of them going this direction and then that direction and that direction. And they were just going different directions. So I'm not sure. And I've seen, like during my Reiki sessions or meditations, I'll sometimes see these neon blue grids. Like when I had Reiki this one time with my friend, this neon blue grid just came over me like this web dome. But none of the I call it a grid, but the angles weren't angular. They were soft and flowy, and like this, and then a different shape over there. They were all real flowy. They weren't real angular, like you would think of a regular type of grid. But that was over the top of me, and it was neon blue. So I keep getting this neon blue stuff and beams, grids, bars. Like I was when I was going up to my grandma's at the beginning of March, I actually saw an X in the sky. And this was, of course, before the eclipse because it didn't happen until April. Um, and some people would think when you say that, well, you saw an X in the sky, it was a cloud formation, or maybe two jets left their trails in the sky like that. That wasn't what it was. It was very overcast that day, and it was in front of my eyes, in front of the clouds. I saw this gray X, and it was really wide. It wasn't like this, it was really wide like that. And
Mhm.
like the top part of it, the top V part of it was more opaque, and then the bottom part was a little bit transparent, not completely transparent, but it was a little bit transparent. And I thought, what, I wonder what that is. And I saw a blue bar, probably about 6 inches long and about, I don't know, an inch thick, underneath my radio that kept flashing a few times. And then I saw these shapes in the clouds that looked like cloaked spacecraft. And one of them, I did journaling about this, and I went back and read later because it's so funny, because one of the shapes looked like a hamburger. And I thought, why the hell would a spaceship look like a hamburger? That is like a cheeseburger, because you could actually see,
Mhm.
it was weird. And then so I kept seeing it, and I'm driving and I'm looking at everything. And finally I go, you know what? This is really cool, y'all, but I'm driving. And for me to be safely on the road, I need not to be having these distractions in front of me like this. So all of it left, every bit of it went away. All of the shapes in the clouds, the X was gone, no more blue lights. I'm like, if y'all want to talk to me, we can have a chat while I'm driving. That I can do, but I can't keep looking at all of these different visuals because I'm going to run off the road trying to capture all of it. So it was really interesting. And then I
That is
saw on
wild.
I heard Danny Henderson had a guest on her show that is I can't remember if he's an astronomer, astrologer, or something with
Mhm.
space stuff and stars and all of the things. And they started talking about the X in the sky, and it caught my attention right away because I had seen it. I was like, holy crap, they're talking about an X. I'm not completely crazy. Because now it's on her podcast. And I didn't call her up and go, hey, could you talk about the X in the sky? I mean, I don't know her yet. And
Yet.
so I and they started talking about it's the path of the eclipses. It makes an X over North America. And then a couple days later,
Indiana, I think.
yeah, but I mean, if you look at the whole path, the track that it goes from start to finish, that's what makes the X. And then a couple days later, it might even been the next day on Dr. Michael Sala's podcast, he actually posted pictures. He shared pictures that showed the X across the sky. And I was like, holy shit, man. That's what I saw. I saw that X. And it was just validation. It was so cool for me because it
Were
was
you in
validation.
Indiana when it happened?
No, I was on my
Were
way to my
you?
grandma's. So I'm in Central Florida and she lives in North
Mhm.
Florida. So I was traveling that direction, and it's exactly where I would have seen it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember my geography that whether you would see that far where the X actually happened, because I think it did actually happen. It did happen over on that side of the country.
Yeah.
And I think it was Indiana or Illinois, one of those
Yeah.
two places.
Indiana, because they were saying everybody's going to Indiana and they didn't know if they would be able to accommodate everyone that was going to go there to watch it. So, yeah, pretty fascinating.
Pretty fascinating. There's so many things that go on that most people are just like oblivious to, but it's just like they're happening all around us. And you can talk to these beings and things will happen. Like I remember one time talking to the trees and talking to just the spirits, and I wanted it to rain because I wanted rain in my garden. And it did rain, but it rained in like a 5 foot circumference around where I was. And it wasn't real heavy, but it was enough for me to know that somebody heard me, somebody gave me some rain, but
So
they're not going to make it rain a lot.
that's so funny. Greg Braden tells a story about how he went with a Native American to this sacred place, and the man did a little ceremony where he didn't do what I mean. It's fascinating to listen to Greg Braden tell the story because the man didn't do what he thought he was going to do. It was kind of this quiet little thing that he did inside of himself instead of like this outward big, show. And he was asking for rain. Well, he was basically thanking for rain. And that's what he told Greg later when they talked about it, that he was visualizing how it was feeling with the rain on his face and the crops and all of the things that it was happening already, and then when it did start raining, it like rained and rained and rained and rained. And then he kind of joked with Greg about, yeah, that's the tricky part. We haven't learned how to like get that off switch on
Turn
there,
off the
you know,
switch.
like moderation, can we have just some light rain for a couple days instead of this torrential downpour that's just washing everything away? So, yeah, you have to be specific, I guess, more specific with what you're asking for when you're doing stuff like that. So,
People don't realize how powerful we are. You can make things happen. I've made the wind stop blowing. It's possible. You just have to focus on it
yeah,
and tell it and speak out loud. And you send the vibration out and it gets a response.
definitely does. It definitely
Words have
does.
so much power.
Yeah, we're magical beings. We really truly are. It's incredible.
It is pretty incredible. Your story is amazing. I appreciate you sharing it with me because I'm sure it's very personal and takes a lot of courage to get on the air and to share that with other people in a
Yeah,
big way like you have just done. Um,
it is a little scary, but it's time. It's time. And I really truly feel like that in my soul that it's time. And I'm all about this disclosure because I feel like it's been going on for a really long time. We're getting little tidbits here and little tidbits there. And my story is, not to minimize anyone's story, but my story is just a small story compared to some of these stories that you hear about people experiencing, like Alex Collier and some other different people that Danny Henderson and Elena Danan. If y'all aren't following those folks, go check them out. And Alex Collier has his own podcast too that he does, and Dr. Michael Sala. Go check. I'll put their names in the description box so y'all can make sure that you capture those. But go check them out and listen to some of the stuff. And I'm really interested to see how this is received. I do have a lot of friends and family that listen to my podcast, so it's going to be really interesting to see how it's received. I'm kind of a little bit nervous, the butterflies a little bit, but at the same time, it's just freaking time. It's just freaking time to start talking about these things,
yeah,
getting it out there. It's real. If it wasn't real, then you wouldn't have half the world talking about it right now. And there's picture
there's so many
proof.
experiences everywhere. It's
Yeah.
you kind of have to just bury your head in the sand to think that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You have to make up so many other things to
Yeah.
explain what's happening because you just can't keep a lid on some things. The more people that say, yeah, me too, then people start to realize that, hey, there's a pattern going on here. Maybe I should pay attention.
Yeah. That it's safe to talk about it. And my thing is just I would love to encourage people that when they do come forward and share their stories, that don't embellish it. Don't embellish it. Just say the story that you remember in the way that you remember it. Don't add
Mhm.
details. Don't say like I'm very honest about how I don't remember what the UBs look like that took me onto that little spaceship. I don't remember all of the details about it. I just remember the outlying shape of it. Don't add
Mhm.
details. Don't try to make it a better story. Just say, in all honesty, the pieces of it that you remember. And if you want to remember more of it, then go have a hypnotic regression done that will be able to bring those details out so that you'll know more then. And maybe one of these days I'll be able to have that done by someone who is reputable and trustworthy because that means a lot to me because I don't want a bullshit situation. My bullshit tolerance is zero. And I don't want to be the person that puts that out there. I want to be the person that's always in integrity with this kind of information because that is so, so important to me.
Yeah, it's important for everyone, really, because the more collection of the data, and that's really what you're doing is you're just looking for data out there.
Yes.
And data does not need to be embellished. When you start embellishing data, then it becomes statistics and everybody can manipulate statistics. So we just want data so
Right.
that we have information that we can, form hypotheses with and test it
Yeah,
so we can find out what the truth is. Because again, truth, repeatable, observable, testable.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, this has been such an amazing conversation, Jill. Thank you for coming on here and talking about this stuff with me because it's, like I said, it's really important that I speak with this about this stuff with someone who is, on the same page and is not just about how cool it is. It's about the truth of it.
Right. And exploring it and seeing where it takes us.
Yeah,
It's very interesting. And it's really it is the cutting edge of science if you're like looking for something to understand. And it pertains to everything. It's not
yes.
like it's just the aliens over there, they're coming to get us. Well, I don't
Right.
think that's true. They are us.
Well, and
And it's
with the
how we
technology
can.
they have, I mean, truthfully, it's so mind-boggling. If they really were out to get us in that way, we'd have been annihilated a long time ago. I mean, they have that capability.
Mhm.
So, maybe there's more to it. And it's been going on a long time. Y'all, this is not new information. This is not. We've been pretending, and it's that agenda. It's that, you know, the hiding all of the information, and that's over. That's over now. Now it's disclosure time. And I would just like to take this opportunity to mention Jessic and Danny Henderson puts this event on every year. Now this will be the third year. It's Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection. And I will link all of this stuff down here because I'm not afraid of sharing other people's stuff. I think we need to get this information out there. And,
Yeah, for sure.
we don't take away from each other when we share each other's stuff. I just firmly believe that I have zero sense of competition in my soul. So I'll link you up with all of this information and go explore it. Check it out. Ask questions. Get curious, right?
And get still and see what you remember.
Yes, absolutely. See what you remember about your own experiences. Absolutely. So, you have anything else to add before we check out of here for today?
No, this has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you having me on to chat about this really very important topic.
Yes.
We've gone so many places with it.
Yeah, we have definitely. So thank you so much again, Jill. I appreciate you coming on, chatting with me in all honesty about all this beautiful stuff. I love it. I love it. I love it. I do. It's so amazing. So, and thank you everyone for jumping in here and listening to another episode of Spiritually Speaking. As always, we do have the Spiritually Speaking Facebook group, which is linked in the description box below the video, as always. I so appreciate each and every one of you. I'm really interested in hearing your feedback on this amazing, incredible topic. Let me know if you think I'm batshit crazy. That's okay because I've thought it about myself at sometimes too. So y'all drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Ask questions. Email me. Put it in the comments. Whatever you want to do. And until next time, I love you all.